2018 saw a lot of good and also bad products, some of which just had a bad price, but today's guide is going to look at some of those products that are just bad, period, in that I wouldn't recommend them to anyone whatsoever. For example, the GT 1030 DDR4 version. This is easily by far the worst product on the list because it came out silently in that it just started hitting the retail shelves and no one knew that they were getting a switch up. The worst thing about this product is it pretty much has the same price tag as the GDDR5 variant, but it performs a lot less. In fact, the performance is so bad on the DDR4 version that the Ryzen APU, the 2200G, will get far more FPS on similar games in similar scenarios. And the GDDR5 version wasn't a bad card. It could still get up and play Fortnite, Dota 2, and all those competitive multiplayer titles. And I guess this was the appeal of it initially. So I'm not entirely sure why Nvidia chose to do this. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say it's that the GT 1030 was perhaps selling too well, especially compared to previous generation low-end cards. And so when a $70 graphics card is perhaps selling too well, and then there's other higher priced options that would make more profit, maybe this was an option for them to push people towards the direction of buying, for instance, a GTX 1050 Ti or a GTX 1060. And hence the DDR4 version is just not recommended to anyone in any situation. But let's check out what else made today's list and what products you should avoid. Welcome back to Tech Yes City, and straight up next on the list was a monitor that I reviewed from Viotech. It was definitely looking good on the surface in that the value for money was there. You had 144 Hz, curved display, 27-inch, VA panel that gave good viewing angles, and the colors were pretty good, except the fact that this monitor was targeted towards gamers. And when I tested out the response times, they're in fact some of the worst I've seen on a VA panel, especially in 2018. This was to the stage where 3 different images were coming out on the same frame. In other words, it would just be one big blurry experience. To top things off with this monitor, it easily had the worst build quality of any monitor I've ever had the experience of using in my life. So Viotech, please, if you're watching this, I'd like to see you improve on your monitors in 2019. Coming up next on this list is eBay fake graphics cards. That's right, folks. I've had messages from people and even locally here, people telling me, I bought this graphics card and it's underperforming. It doesn't even run some of the games. And I had some of these fake graphics cards here on hand and I experienced the same thing. They were just complete garbage. Even at the price points that they're selling at, which is easily well under what others are asking for a legitimate product of the same caliber, these things were just total garbage. Avoid at all costs, and in fact, if you got hit with one of these and then you started loading up games and the FPS was really low, you should definitely try and get your money back. Coming in next here is the RTX series, more specifically the RTX 2080, because when this was first released, it had pretty much the same price point as a 1080 Ti, but the problem was that it performed in some of the titles, actually most of the titles, a little bit worse, and to top all that off, it had 3 GB less VRAM. Not to mention the efficiency benefits weren't really there, and then when you looked at the RTX features that were promised to come with these cards, they really didn't work at all on the release date, and even fast forward to this date, Windows has rolled back the 1809 update, so a lot of people can't even use these features even though Nvidia is trying to improve them and they're trying to roll out things like DLSS. The RTX 2070 on the flip side, I did however sort of like what that card was doing. Certainly it wasn't great for 2 years in the making, and the 2080 Ti did offer more performance over the 1080 Ti, but it did so at using a lot more power. So the RTX 2000 series in general was a little bit of a letdown in 2018. Next up here on the list, we have 2 different graphics cards that if you did buy them, they're not going to leave you high and dry. They'll still play games quite well. It's just compared to their normal counterparts, they aren't a good buy and I wouldn't recommend them to anyone. First up is the RX 580 2048 SP. These were sold in the Chinese domestic market and they were really just an RX 570 and rebadged as an RX 580. I'm not entirely sure what AMD was doing with this naming scheme. Comes in similar to the GT 1030 in terms of the naming, but at least in this case, the card will perform quite well. I mean, an RX 570 certainly does get up and boogie at 1080p. And then to follow up with this, we had the GTX 1065 GB. I actually had one of these on hand, and it performed in some cases worse than the GTX 1063 GB. Because it had reduced memory bandwidth, this really affected the performance of the card itself. And ironically, both these cards come in at similar price points, for instance as the GTX 1066 GB and an RX 580 2304 stream processors. And then coming up last on the list here is budget chipset motherboards from both Intel, which is the H310, and then from AMD, which is the A320. If you can get these on sale and you know that's all you need, then they can be okay, but at their retail prices, you generally just want to spend a little bit extra and get, for instance, a B350, which will give you the ability to overclock your CPU. And in the case of the A320, you can't overclock, and on a lot of those budget Ryzen processors, you can extract so much value by just simply going into the BIOS and upping the CPU multiplier. On the Intel side, however, the H310 saw reduced features compared to the B360, and this enabled it just really to come out as poor value, especially compared to previous years on their budget chipset lineup. Anyway guys, there's pretty much the worst products of 2018 for enthusiast tech that I wouldn't recommend to pretty much anyone. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to hit that like button. Also, one product that sort of came in okay, I guess, for cryptocurrency miners, but is practically worthless for gamers, is the P106 graphics card as well. I did a video on this where it just ended up being useless in a gaming situation. If you want to check out more, I'll put the link up here. But other than that, let me know in the description below if you've tried out some new products this year and they've been terrible, as I love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, and I'll catch you in the next tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.